This happened about 10 years ago, back when I was 15. My sister Amy was 17. We were on a long cross-country road trip with my mom and our grandparents, moving my grandparents closer to some other family. It was a long, boring drive, and by the third day we were all sick of being in the car. We pulled off the highway somewhere in the Midwest into one of those tiny towns that time forgot. Our motel was a 2-story L-shaped building called the Starlight Inn, or something equally generic. It wasn't a fancy place. The carpets were worn, and the whole place smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cleaning solution. My grandparents got a room on the first floor near the lobby, while my mom, my sister, and I were on the second floor at the end of a long hallway. After we lugged our bags inside, my mom realized the ice bucket was empty. She was tired and wanted to just relax, so she asked Amy and me to go fill it up. "Sure," Amy said, grabbing the bucket. "Come on." The ice machine, according to the map on the back of our door, was on the first floor. We left our room, the door clicking shut behind us, and started walking down the long, quiet hallway toward the stairs. The lighting was that dingy yellow kind that makes everything look a little sickly. Our footsteps were muffled by the thin, patterned carpet. As we got closer to the stairwell, a man came out of a room a few doors down from ours. He was maybe in his late 30s with greasy dark hair and a plain gray t-shirt that was a little too tight on him. He had his key in his hand and was fiddling with the lock on his door. We heard the lock click, but he didn't open the door. He just stood there watching us walk past. He didn't smile or nod. He just stared with these flat, empty eyes. It was weird, but you see weird people all the time, so I didn't think too much of it. I just kept walking. We went through the door to the stairwell. It was a concrete stairwell that echoed with every step. As the heavy door swung shut behind us, I heard it click open again almost immediately. I glanced back through the little wire mesh window in the door and saw the man. He was coming into the stairwell behind us. He hadn't gone into his room at all. He just waited for us to pass and then started following us. A cold feeling trickled down my spine. "Amy," I hissed. "I know." She hissed back, picking up her pace. We clattered down the stairs and pushed our way onto the first floor. The hallway looked identical to the one upstairs. The sign for the ice machine pointed to the far end of the building, the opposite end from where the stairs led us out. It felt like a mile away. We started walking, trying to act normal, trying not to look back. The plastic ice bucket swung in Amy's hand. I could hear the faint, steady sound of footsteps behind us, matching our pace. He wasn't rushing. He was just following. We finally reached the ice machine, which was tucked into a little alcove next to a vending machine. The ice machine was loud, one of those old ones that makes a huge racket. Amy shoved the bucket under the dispenser and pushed the button. Ice tumbled out with a deafening clatter. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The noise of the machine was the only sound in the world for about 10 seconds. When it was full, the machine groaned to a stop and the hallway was plunged back into a tense silence. Amy pulled the bucket out, and as she turned, she looked back down the long hallway we had just walked. Her eyes went wide. She didn't even look at me. She just hissed, "Go!" I followed her gaze. Down the hallway, maybe 50 feet away, the man was standing there watching us. As soon as we made eye contact, he started walking toward us again, his pace picking up slightly. Luckily, I remembered the map. There were stairs on both ends of the building. We were right next to the other stairwell. Amy didn't need to say anything else. I was already moving. We bolted for the stairwell door, the ice sloshing in the bucket. We burst through the door and scrambled up the concrete steps, taking them 2 at a time. We didn't dare look back to see if he was following us up the stairs. We just ran. We burst back out onto the second floor and sprinted down the hallway to our room, fumbling with the key card. The door finally beeped and clicked open. We tumbled inside, slammed the door shut, and threw every lock on it. The deadbolt, the chain, and that little metal swing bar at the top. We were both breathing heavily, leaning against the door, listening. There were no running footsteps, no sound from the hallway at all. It was completely silent. "What was that?" I panted, my voice shaking. "I have no idea," Amy said, her face pale. We told our mom what happened. She was concerned, but she tried to calm us down. "Maybe you just spooked him," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Later, when we went down to our grandparents' room, we told my grandma. She just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you two were probably just being loud. Maybe he thought you were a couple of teenagers who were going to cause trouble." Her reaction made me feel stupid. Like maybe we had overreacted, but my gut told me we hadn't. We went back to our room, made sure the door was still locked tight, and tried to forget about it. Thankfully, we were only staying there for one night. I wish that were the end of the story. Sometime deep in the night, I was woken up by a sound. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. It was a low, heavy thud coming from our door. My eyes snapped open in the darkness. Amy was already sitting bolt upright in her bed, her eyes wide with terror. My mom sat up, her hand flying to her mouth. It wasn't a knock. A knock is a sharp rap. This was a heavy, full-fisted pounding, like someone was trying to break the door down with their shoulder. It was slow and deliberate. There was no voice, no one yelling, "Open up!" Just the relentless, terrifying pounding. My blood ran cold. It had to be him. He knew which room we were in. He had waited. My mom, shaking, grabbed the motel phone and fumbled to dial the front desk, but no one answered. She then grabbed her cell phone and whispered to a 911 operator, explaining that a man was trying to break into our motel room. The pounding stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving a ringing silence in its place. The silence was almost worse. We sat there frozen, holding our breath, listening for any sound from the hallway. There was nothing. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 5 or 6 minutes before we heard firm, quick knocks on the door and a voice call out, "Police, is everything okay in there?" My mom, with tears in her eyes, stumbled to the door and looked through the peephole before undoing the locks. 2 police officers were standing in the hallway. It was empty otherwise. They were calm and professional. We told them everything from the ice machine incident to the pounding on the door. One officer stayed with us while the other went to check the hallways and stairwells. He came back a few minutes later, shaking his head. "No one out there." "The place is quiet," my mom insisted. "He was here." "He was trying to get in." The first officer nodded. "Ma'am, I'm going to talk to the night manager and see if we can get a look at the security camera footage from the hallways." They left, and we locked the door again. All of us now huddled on one bed, too scared to even think about sleeping. About 20 minutes later, one of the officers returned. His face was serious. "Well," he said, "you weren't imagining it. We saw him on the CCTV footage. Followed you 2 girls right down the hall to the ice machine, then watched you run up the other stairs. A little while ago, we saw him come right up to your door and just stand there for a while. Then he starts banging on it. A chill went through me. It was real. Did you find him? Do you know who he is?" My mom asked. The officer shook his head. "He went down the emergency exit stairwell at the end of the hall about 10 minutes before we arrived. The cameras don't cover the parking lot on that side. He's gone. We have a clear shot of his face, though. We'll run it through the system." He looked at all of us. "Keep this door locked with everything you've got. We'll have a patrol car do a few extra sweeps through the parking lot tonight." We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. We sat in the dark, listening to every creak and groan of the old motel. The moment the sun started to rise, we were packing our things. We checked out as fast as we could, not even stopping for breakfast. Getting back in the car and pulling onto the highway felt like escaping prison. We left that town behind us, and because we were just passing through, we never got an update from the police. We never found out if they identified him or if he was ever arrested. Years ago, I was on a solo cross-country trip to a family reunion, winding my way through a patchwork of highways and state roads. I was supposed to crash at a friend's place halfway through, but a storm had rolled in, slow-moving, ominous, all-consuming. Sheets of rain reduced visibility to near nothing, and traffic slowed to a crawl. Then, just ahead of me on a stretch of Route 250, a terrible wreck stopped everything for hours. Emergency vehicles arrived. People got out of their cars. Someone was medevaced. The kind of accident that echoes in your mind for weeks afterward, even if you didn't see it happen. By the time traffic cleared and I made it out of the jam, I was 5 hours behind schedule. The adrenaline had long since worn off, replaced by a dull, groggy ache in the back of my skull. My bladder was screaming, my eyes were dry, and my limbs had that weird buzzing weight of too many highway miles. I needed a stop, a bathroom, a shower, a place to close my eyes. I pulled off the road when I saw a sputtering, sun-faded sign for a strip motel, mountainside or mountaintop, something vaguely rustic sounding. It was a single-story row of rooms flanked by dead trees and cracked pavement. Across the road was a lonely diner with a flickering open sign. Otherwise nothing, not a single other car in the lot. The office had one of those night check-in windows, like at gas stations in sketchy parts of town. Behind the glass was a guy in a stained t-shirt, thin and hollow-eyed like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't smile. He just stared at me as I walked up, his eyes scanning from my car to me and back again. "You alone?" he asked before I could even say hi. That should have been a huge red flag. But I was tired. I was college-age then, used to budget travel and couch surfing. I said, "Yeah, just passing through, trying to get some sleep before hitting the road again." He didn't ask for my ID, didn't want a credit card either, just cash. I hesitated, probably visibly, but I was desperate and figured it'd be fine for a few hours. I dug around in my bag until I found just enough crumpled bills and change. He slid a key under the glass without a word. "Room 6. The door creaked when I opened it. Inside, the room was exactly what you'd expect. Dim, musty, and stained with decades of use. Brown carpet worn threadbare in spots. A TV from the 90s bolted to the dresser. One lamp flickered when I turned it on. I used the bathroom. Then on a hunch I still can't explain, I flipped the mattress. Big mistake. There were dark rust-colored stains, the telltale signs of bed bugs. Worse, a cockroach skittered out from beneath the mattress and disappeared into the shadows. That was it. I wasn't staying in there a minute longer. I went back to my SUV, locked the doors, and folded down the back seats to make a makeshift bed in the trunk hatch. I had a suitcase I used as a pillow, a pile of random clothes for warmth, and just enough room to curl up. It wasn't comfortable, but it felt safer than that room. I must have slept for an hour, maybe less. What woke me was the low murmur of a voice, a man's voice. I blinked, groggy, trying to place where I was. Then I heard the gravel crunch under his feet. I peered out just barely through the tinted glass of the back hatch. It was the check-in guy. He was standing outside on his phone. I couldn't hear much, just a few words. "Still there?" "Room 6. Something about lights." He hung up and stood there for a second, looking around like he was waiting for something. Then he walked over to room 6, my room. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The lights didn't come on. He was in there for maybe a minute. When he came back out, he slammed the door shut hard enough to make me jump, but he wasn't alone. There was another guy with him now, one I hadn't seen arrive. He must have come from behind the building, or maybe he'd already been inside. No idea. He hadn't gone in with the check-in guy, but he came out with him. They were both angry, cursing under their breath. Then came the worst part. The check-in guy started walking toward my SUV. I ducked down, heart hammering in my chest. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed a t-shirt and pulled it over my head, trying to blend in with the clutter of bags and blankets. I heard the door handle jiggle, locked. Then his face appeared at the window, peering in. He didn't see me. Maybe it was the darkness. Maybe the tint held up. Maybe I just looked like part of the mess in the back seat. Whatever the reason, he moved on. The two men retreated to the far edge of the parking lot toward the diner. One of them pointed across the road, gesturing with wide, sweeping motions. I didn't wait to find out what they were planning. I climbed as silently as I could over the seats into the front, slid the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, breaking the quiet like a gunshot. Both men turned in surprise, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just drove. I called a couple of friends once I was back on the main road, adrenaline still coursing through me. One of them offered to pay for a better hotel further up the highway. Another told me I was probably overreacting. I didn't call my family. I didn't want to scare them. 3 weeks later, once I was home and it felt distant enough to talk about, we pulled up Google Maps and tried to find the place. We found the motel. Same layout, same name, but it was marked permanently closed. I called the local police just to file something in case there had been other complaints. They told me it had shut down days before. No explanation. I never heard anything else. Some of my friends still say I probably misunderstood what I saw, that there was a logical explanation. But there's something about the way the guy walked into that room without turning on the light. Something about how angry he looked when he walked back out and found it empty. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed, but I'm glad I didn't find out. I still remember the night it all unfolded back in 2017. The case of a missing woman had been on the news for months in Michigan. Her face was on posters taped to gas station doors and grocery store windows. The local paper ran her photo so many times that people started to look past it, the way you stop noticing a billboard after seeing it too often. Some assumed she was gone for good. Others whispered darker theories, trafficking, foul play, or that she had simply run away. I worked late shifts at a diner near the edge of town. Just down the road sat an old roadside motel. It was the kind of place that never changed its sheets often enough, where the neon vacancy sign flickered nonstop and the curtains stayed drawn tight. People avoided it unless they were desperate. Every time I passed it on my way home, I got a heavy feeling in my stomach. That night around midnight, I clocked out and drove home past the motel. At first, it looked like every other night, quiet, a single bulb lighting up the cracked parking lot. But as I rolled past, I noticed something that made me slow down. A door upstairs was shaking, not gently, but like someone inside was pounding hard against it. Then I heard it, a woman scream. It cut through the night like a knife. At first I thought it was just a couple fighting, but the sound wasn't normal. It was frantic, raw, almost animal. I stopped my car along the shoulder and listened. The scream turned into sobs, then back into yelling, and then a crash echoed from inside the room, like furniture being thrown. A man staying in the room next door stepped out onto the walkway. He looked around nervously but didn't move closer. I could tell he was listening too, but instead of helping, he went back inside and shut his door. That made me uneasy, like he already knew better than to get involved. The longer I sat there, the more wrong it felt. I thought about calling 911, but before I could, 2 sets of headlights appeared behind me, police cruisers. Someone else had already called. I stayed parked as the officers pulled in. They quickly scanned the building, then went up the stairs to the door where the noise was coming from. From where I sat, I could see shadows moving inside as the screaming grew louder. The officers banged on the door and shouted commands. For a few seconds, everything went silent. That silence was worse than the screaming. It made me imagine what might be happening behind that thin wooden door. Then came a loud crash. They had forced it open. I held my breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The next sound was chaos, boots stomping, shouting, and then cutting through everything, a woman's voice. She wasn't just crying. She was wailing, sobbing in relief like she hadn't made a sound like that in years. It was so powerful I could hear it from the lot. My stomach turned when I realized this was the missing woman, the same one from the posters. The next day, the whole town knew. Police had found her alive inside that motel room after months of being gone. It was her family who tipped them off. They had gotten information about where she might be and begged officers to check the motel. Neighbors later admitted they'd been hearing screams and cries on and off, but had convinced themselves it was just fights or drug use. Nobody wanted to get involved. That detail haunted me. People heard her, but they ignored it. I couldn't stop thinking, how many nights had she screamed like that, with cars like mine driving past and people like me deciding it was none of their business? The papers reported she had been trapped inside for months. I kept imagining what that room must have looked like before the police opened the door. Heavy curtains shut, stale air, maybe the faint sound of cars passing on the highway outside while she sat inside, knowing she was so close to freedom yet invisible. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if her family hadn't spoken up again. Maybe she would have stayed locked in that room until no one heard her anymore. For weeks after, I replayed everything in my head. The pounding on the door, the way the man next door retreated instead of helping, the silence right before the police broke in. That silence is what sticks with me the most. I could almost feel what she must have felt in those seconds, waiting to see if the people on the other side of the door were going to save her or leave her behind. The motel never shut down. It's still there, the neon sign buzzing faintly over the cracked lot. I drove by not long ago, and I swear I slowed down without even meaning to. A chill crawled over me as I stared at those drawn curtains, wondering what other secrets those rooms had held. Horror doesn't always live in haunted houses or dark forests. Sometimes it's just a cheap roadside motel you've driven past 100 times, and sometimes the only clue that someone's trapped inside is a scream in the middle of the night.